Hello, I'm Elizabeth with the Newport Historical Society, and today we are speaking with Dr. Allison Horrocks, who's a former Buchanan Burnham Fellow for the Historical Society. Allison works as a park ranger at the Lowell National Park, and she manages the podcast American Girls. Today, she's going to discuss her research with Rhode Island's role in the 19th Amendment.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me. It was really my pleasure and privilege to be with the Newport Historical Society almost a decade ago. Since then, I've been working in a range of cultural institutions, including house museums, and I've been really interested in women's history and domestic history. And obviously, with the centennial of the 19th Amendment coming up, a lot of people are thinking about women's history, especially right now. And one of the things I've been saying for a few years is it's so important to think of the 19th Amendment 100 years ago in its particular context. So thinking about everything that happened 2 years prior, there was a pandemic, something that we probably understand better than we would have last year. There was also the end of a massive world war. But what's really also striking about Rhode Island specifically and the 19th Amendment, not so much when it passed and was ratified in 1920, but the fact that 80 years earlier, there was actually a rebellion led by someone in the state of Rhode Island to totally change suffrage. When we look back at the first 50 or so years of the United States, almost no one could vote. In the very first elections, it was well under 10% of the United States population that could vote. And Rhode Island, having such a vital role in the Industrial Revolution, was increasingly creating populations that didn't own land. And part of why that's so important is there were really strict regulations, I would say particularly and especially on men, that unless you owned a certain amount of land, you weren't thought of as having a stake in the Republic. And so in the 1840s, we have the Dorr Rebellion, which has a really important Newport connection. And part of why that's happening is there's all these larger conversations about who should get a say in the Republic. If more and more people work for wages, if more and more people don't own land, should they still get an opportunity to vote? So a lot of people think about the 19th Amendment in 1920, or they think about Seneca Falls or the convention held in Worcester. But it's in the 1840s that people are debating abolition, they're debating suffrage, and in Rhode Island, that it actually leads to a declaration of martial law to stop what's basically a revolution from happening in allowing people to vote. So I'm really excited to get to share kind of a different starting point for suffrage and to trace us through about an 80-year history of activism that finally culminates in 1920.
Well, thank you very much for sharing this insight. And if you are feeling the quarantine boredom, visit history.org and shopnewporthistory.com.